Good morning everyone, my name is Councillor Ranatunga and I am the chair of this licensing subcommittee. I have with me today Councillor Thomas and Councillor Bridge, and just to go round the room, I believe we have Ms Wolfe, the applicant, is that right? We've got Ms Mansfield alongside her, and on this side we've got Mr Lewin, our legal advisor to the committee, our licensing officer Mr Cannon, and the police Sergeant Bueno, is that right? Thank you. Now, in terms of where we are, we've got declarations of interest first. Do we have any declarations of interest?
No.
Any declarations of interest? No. So there's no declarations of interest. In terms of what we're here to deal with, it's the application for the renewal of Ms Wolfe's operator's licence. We have an agenda which we've seen, and the procedure which we're going to follow will be to first hear from our licensing officer who's going to present the report. We may have some questions. Then we're going to turn to Ms Wolfe, who's going to present, and we might have some questions for her. We'll then hear from Ms Mansfield, and then finally the police. And again, we might have questions for the police. And then finally, I'll ask for some concluding remarks. I think we'll take that from the licensing officer first and end with Ms Wolfe with concluding remarks. We'll then hear from our legal advisor before deliberating. So we'll now turn to our licensing officer and the officer report. Mr Cannon.
Thank you, Chair. This applicant for a licence first got a licence in 2017. You'll have seen that I've set out in my report, which is within the agenda papers, in some detail the history of this particular person. But I'm just going to summarise for the purposes of the meeting. I won't read the whole thing out. We'll be here for some time. When she first applied, she was operating just 2 vehicles, but in March of this year, after we had noticed that she had increased the number of vehicles that she was operating to 12, we went to inspect her offices, and you can see in paragraphs 3, 4 and 5 of my report that we found a situation that was far from ideal. Messy records, no electronic booking system. That culminated in officers giving Ms Wolfe an official warning at that time. In April there was a complaint about one of the drivers, also called Wolfe, Mr Len Wolfe. Officers received a complaint that he had refused to take a guide dog in his vehicle, which of course is a breach of the legislation, as you'll know, Chair. Just skipping through to May, officers then became aware that there was a Facebook post, a public Facebook post, which was quite critical, and at least one officer thought it might have been threatening, about activities of officers of this authority, posted by Ms Wolfe. And again, the details are set out in the agenda. Now, in August of this year, Mr Wolfe again, Len Wolfe, was found by an officer of the authority parked on a taxi rank, which you'll know, Chair, is not allowed and potentially a criminal offence. We understand that as a result of that, Mr Wolfe no longer works for the organisation, but nonetheless it was a cause of concern for officers that he had done that, and perhaps calls into question the judgment of the applicant to some extent. Just to complete the picture then, in October of this year, so not very long ago, again, we received information that Ms Wolfe had been involved in an incident and had refused to provide a statement when requested. Now, I should say that she was under no legal obligation to provide a statement in a case such as that, but here at this authority we do expect our drivers to comply and cooperate as much as possible with police officers and so on, and it was disappointing to hear that she hadn't wanted to assist in those circumstances. Perhaps of more concern, we understand that she was also a suspect in a mobile phone theft case around the same time, but no doubt Sergeant Bueno will have more to say about that. Chair, just to skip through to this morning's procedure, I've set out for you and the other councillors the options that the committee can take, and although we don't make a recommendation, as you know, in this authority, and so my recommendation is that you should consider whether to grant or renew the licence or to refuse it. I've set out the grounds on which you could refuse it, and I hope it's clear from my report what view the officer's take of this applicant. But that, Chair, is my report.
Thank you, Mr. Cannon. So just dealing with questions, a couple from me first.
Yes.
The electronic booking system.
Yes.
What was the position? What's the position now? And what do officers say? Are they happy now with that?
Well, Chair, you will know that there's only a requirement to have an electronic booking system, although we recommend it for all operators. There's only a requirement under our conditions to have it if you operate more than 11 vehicles. So prior to the expansion of the business, there was no formal requirement to have electronic system, and Ms Wolfe didn't. But of course, if you don't have one, you need to keep good records. And as you see from the agenda, back in March, those records were not good. They were handwritten, some were missing, they weren't good. But given that we required her to install an electronic system after that inspection, I understand that she did so, and a colleague went back in July, and I'm given to understand there is now an electronic booking system in operation. So to that extent, we're satisfied that that's been complied with.
So in terms of record keepings, you can confirm there's compliance today?
Going forward, yes. I mean, an electronic booking system will have a function that records bookings in a way that can't be lost and so on. So yes, and that's why we require them.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yes. What's the position on training?
Training, again, back when we inspected in March, there were issues with record keeping generally, but we were of the view that the dispatcher working at the time hadn't been properly trained. And perhaps more worryingly, there were no records of training at all at the time, in keeping with the position that we found. Although I understand that Ms Wolfe has now at least got a training record. I don't have any up-to-date information about staff training, but no doubt Ms Wolfe will be able to help you with that, given that she's in charge of training her staff.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cannon. So we'll now turn to Ms Wolfe, the applicant. This is your opportunity. Please.
Well, sir, as you know, I'm asking the committee to extend my licence for a further 3 years. And I recognise that there have been some problems with the licence and the way it operated early on. That said, there were 15 months when there were no problems with the licence and the way I was operating it. And everything the licensing officers have asked me to do, I've done. It's just a question of not being very experienced when I first started out. We've had some growing pains. There've been some learnings, and we've made some improvements in the way we work, which I'd like to tell you about, as well as wanting to go into partnership with my proposed business partner, Miss Mansfield, who brings a lot of expertise and knowledge, much more than I have in the industry. In terms of what the changes that I've made, I have made a few changes, one of which you've already heard about in relation to the electronic booking system. And that's meant that my own business is much more organised, it's much easier to keep records, and my dispatcher has been trained on how to use that booking system. I've also been on that training so that if the dispatcher's not available or away, I'm able to step in and able to use the system. And I've taken the requests made by the licensing officer extremely seriously. I am sorry about the Facebook post, but I do want you to know that it was on a personal Facebook page. I do have a Facebook page for the taxi company, and it's just called Bloomsbury Taxis. And this particular comment was made on my own Facebook page, and I was just really annoyed at what happened. I did apologise to the officer when I spoke to him and met with him in September, and I apologise again to the committee. It's not something that's going to happen again. It's not something that has happened again. And I'm confident going forward with the changes that I've made that there aren't going to be any further problems with the way the licence operates.
Okay, thank you. Again, questions from the subcommittee. I'll just go first if that's okay. Mr. Wolfe, obviously there were concerns with him refusing to collect a passenger with a guide dog. And then we've heard later about him being on the Hackney carriage stand, which he shouldn't have been anyway, and what happened around that. You've obviously continued to employ him through April after the first incident and into August. Can you help me with why?
Well, so he's no longer working for me, and it's when the second incident happened with the taxi rank and him being parked somewhere he shouldn't be that I decided that it wasn't appropriate to continue to employ him, and I really would like to assure you that all of my drivers are aware of the requirements and their responsibilities. I did continue to employ him. I didn't realise that about the need to register an exemption. I realise that now, and again, that's partly my inexperience, and that's one of the reasons I'm bringing Miss Mansfield in to try and improve those processes. I did apply for an exemption when I realised one was required, and it was giving him the benefit of the doubt. I hadn't realised that he had been parked in a place he shouldn't have been parked in. It wasn't something I was aware of, and as soon as I became aware of it, we parted company.
Okay. Anything else?
Can I ask, what is your relationship to Mr. Wolf?
So he's my cousin, and at the time I took him on, he was looking for work. He'd been looking for work for some time, and I was trying to do him a favour, and it's kind of backfired on me, and it's something I regret. And as difficult as it was to part company with him, I knew that that was the right thing to do for my business, and so he no longer works for me.
All right, moving on then to the Facebook post. Obviously, I hear it's your personal account, but can I just say on behalf of the council, we take very seriously any threats to members of our staff who have to do their jobs on a daily basis. What's your response to what Mr. Cannon was saying about that?
So it was on my personal Facebook page, and whilst I heard what Mr. Cannon says, I wasn't intending to be threatening. I don't think it was threatening. I did use language that I regret using, but there was no motivation or threat in what I said. And as I say, it was on a personal page. It wasn't on my company page, and it hasn't happened again. And that's really what I'd like to emphasise, is that it's something I realise I shouldn't have done, and I am sorry about, and it won't happen again.
Okay, and then the police reports, finally. I know we'll hear from Sergeant Bueno later, but I just wanted to clarify on those. I mean, we've got the road rage incident involving one of your passengers, firstly, and then the question of the investigation about the suspected theft of the mobile phone, which I can see didn't go any further. Do you want to say anything more about that? Obviously, we're looking at whether you are a fit and proper operator moving forward. Anything more to say?
Just to say that I didn't realise when the police asked me for a statement that the licensing officers would be expecting me to provide one. I do realise that now, and I understand the reasons why, but it's not something I appreciated at the time, and I was worried about getting myself into trouble or getting the passenger into trouble. But I do understand why they wanted it, and going forward that they will have my full cooperation as they have done. On the phone business, I don't really understand what that's all about. The police didn't press any charges. I haven't been arrested for anything. All that happened was that I found a phone, and it was my intention to take it into the police station. I hadn't got to that point when all this kicked off and the police became involved. But that's all that's about, and it hasn't gone anywhere, and I don't really understand why the police are trying to rely on it in the context of my renewal application.
Thank you, Ms. Wolfe. So just before we move to Ms. Mansfield, I'll just ask, are there any questions from the police? No. Okay, thank you for that. So we'll move on to Ms. Mansfield. This is your opportunity. What do you have to say?
Thank you, sir. So I'm here to support Ms. Wolfe's application. As you're aware, we're due to become business partners. By way of update, the contract's all drafted and ready to go. We're just waiting for a few legal niceties to tie up, but that should all be in place by next week. As far as I'm concerned, I've held a Hackney carriage driver's license with this council for 8 years now. I have a good record, a clean record. I've never had any complaints. Anytime there's been an inspection, my records have always been up to the standards required by this council. In terms of how I am able to assist, I have a great deal of experience doing pre-booked work, so I do that in my own right already, and I appreciate that that's one of the problem areas that Ms. Wolfe had, so I'll be able to bring my experience I am diligent. I've been on lots of industry training. That's another aspect that I'll bring to Miss Wolf's business. Really, I think moving forward, once we're in partnership, and also taking into account all the steps that Miss Wolf has already implemented, I do think that moving forward there won't be any problems.
Okay, thank you. So again, questions from the committee, if I may, just a couple from me first. You have helped us, so you've had a licence for from the council for what? What particular licence have you had, sorry?
Hackney carriage driver's licence. I'm self-employed, but I've had that for 8 years now. 8
years, thank you. But just in terms of that, you've not held an operator's licence then from the council, is that right?
That's right, I've not held.
Okay. And have you ever held a operator's licence?
No, I've not.
Okay, thank you. And then 8 years with us. Any other questions?
Will you be able to commit enough time towards helping Miss Wolf?
Yes, so I don't intend to stop being a driver as well, but as per the contracts that we've signed, I'll be giving 30 hours a week to Bloomsbury Taxis. I am committed to Miss Wolf's business. We're eager to go into this together, and while I will do my own thing on the side, that will be very much a side activity, not my main employment moving forward. The plan is to mainly do the driving on the weekends and maybe 1 or 2 nights a week.
Okay, thank you. So just to be clear, that's 30 hours.
30 hours under the contract.
When you do those hours is not set, but it's likely to be what you've just said, is that right? Okay, thank you. Any other questions? No. Thank you, Ms Mansfield. So now on our agenda, we'll move to the police. Sergeant Bueno, good morning. This is your section. Please assist.
Thank you. I take a strict view about the need for operators to cooperate with both the licensing authority and the police. The investigation of the road rage incident involving Miss Wolf's passenger was discontinued for other reasons, and not just because she didn't give a statement in relation to it. However, I think that Miss Wolf should have cooperated by providing a statement, and the police really do need to be able to rely on operators to keep the public safe. As for the allegation of theft, Miss Wolf was found in possession of a mobile phone which had been reported as missing from Joyce's cafe a week earlier. She was arrested on suspicion of theft and interviewed under caution. She denied having stolen the phone and claimed to have found it and that she intended to return it to the owner. I am sceptical about that claim, but the cafe had CCTV that was not working and there were no other witnesses who saw what happened. Therefore, we decided to discontinue that investigation.
Okay, thank you for that. So, questions of the police. I'm just going to clarify a couple of matters. Firstly, in terms of the road rage incident, can you just help me? Just tell me a little bit more about that. What exactly happened?
The incident involved a passenger in the vehicle and a pedestrian on the road. There was an argument between the two of them that culminated in a bottle being thrown at the taxi, but that investigation was discontinued for various other reasons.
Yes, and that was a passenger of a driver of one of Miss Wolf's, for one of Miss Wolf's taxis. Okay, all right, and discontinued for other reasons.
Yes.
So there wasn't cooperation from Miss Wolf in terms of police investigation, but it didn't in the end go further.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And then in terms of the allegation of theft, just a little bit more on that. I think it was from a cafe, is that right? And
Correct.
What happened on that?
We had reason to believe that she had stolen the phone. She denied doing so, but in the absence of CCTV evidence and other witnesses, we had to discontinue the investigation.
Okay, thank you. If there's no further questions from the committee, I am going to give an opportunity to Ms Wolf if you've got any questions of the police.
I have actually. So the road rage incident, I wasn't driving that car. That's right, isn't it? Do you agree with that?
Yes.
It was one of my drivers driving the car, and it was one of his passengers that was involved in this. So I didn't know anything about it. That's right, isn't it?
Our issue was to do with the cooperation with our investigation, not your
But I wasn't
specific
there,
role.
was I?
No, you weren't.
And so I didn't really realise how I could be helpful to you. I didn't understand why you were coming to me for a statement. It's not because I was trying to hide anything, just that I didn't see anything. And that was the only reason I didn't provide a statement. I didn't want to get myself into trouble or my driver into trouble.
Yes, I think just to say, Ms Wolfe, the issue for this council and this committee is actually about cooperating with the police full stop on any level, any investigation that they have, being a professional operator and the cooperation that you might provide. So that's the matter that we're going to be considering on that, just so that you know. Do you have any other questions for the police?
I did want to ask about the mobile phone, if that's okay.
Okay.
Just on that, you haven't pressed any charges, you haven't arrested me for it. I thought I was innocent until proven guilty. All that happened was that I found that mobile phone and I was going to hand it in. And I just hadn't had an opportunity to do that because I'm busy running my business. I didn't steal it, and I don't understand why you're picking on me. I feel like you're pursuing me without any justification.
It'd be our position that it does go to Miss Wolfe's honesty, in particular, that it took her a week to do anything about the phone. But she's correct to say it didn't result in a criminal conviction.
But so I didn't know it was stolen a week ago. I'd only just found it. So I don't know when it was stolen, but when I found it, I was going to hand it in. I didn't do it straight away, but I didn't wait a week either.
All right. Well, thank you. We've got the point I think that we need, and so if that's all the questions you've got, we'll move on.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for that. So we're now moving on to any concluding remarks. We'll, I think, just look to this side of the table first, and I think ask Ms Boner, I know you've just had your opportunity to put forward what you have to say, but do you have any concluding remarks to make?
Only to reiterate what I've said about Miss Wolfe's cooperation and honesty.
All right, and I just wanted to give you that final opportunity. The licensing officer, I know you're not making recommendations, but any concluding remarks to make there? No. All right, so finally, Ms Wolfe, do you have any concluding remarks you'd like to make? Can I just say, we're not now adding to anything in terms of new things to say, but just covering or anything you want to summarise in terms of what we've heard today.
Well, I don't want to repeat everything I've already said, but I do want to make it clear that I'm not a dishonest person, and the police officer seems to be suggesting that both with the failure to give a statement and the mobile phone I've been dishonest. I haven't. I have cooperated, and when the licensing officer has asked me to do anything, I've done it, and I'm really serious about making this business work and work professionally, and that's partly why I'm bringing Miss Mansfield in. And I'm confident that I will be able to comply with the requirements of the licence, and that's why I'm asking for a further 3 years.
Thank you, Ms Wolfe. So in a moment we're going to deliberate about our decision, but before we do that I'm going to turn to our legal advisor, Mr Lewin, just to give us any legal advice. And before he does so, just to be absolutely clear, Mr Lewin is here as our legal advisor. He doesn't take part in the decision, he advises us on points of law. Mr Lewin.
Thank you, Chair. As you know, Miss Wolfe's operator's licence is due to expire in about 2 weeks' time. This is her application to renew it for an additional 3 years. Essentially, you've got a decision to grant that application or refuse it. And if you decide to refuse it, there are a number of grounds in the legislation, and they're set out in paragraph 14 of your report. I'd emphasise that any other reasonable cause is very broad, and it effectively allows you to take into account anything that you think is relevant. And if I can summarise the issues that I think arise from this application, they are these. Firstly, whether Miss Wolfe is experienced enough to hold an operator's licence. And secondly, whether you can be confident that she has addressed the various problems that officers identified with her operation in the last 9 months. Thirdly, whether she's provided good explanations for continuing to employ Mr Wolfe as a driver and for the Facebook post. And finally, whether anything you've heard from the police causes you to doubt whether she's a fit and proper person to hold the operator's licence. In making that decision, you'll need to have regard to our taxi and private hire licensing policy, The licensing officer has helpfully set out the relevant extracts at paragraph 16, but if I can summarise them for you. The council expects its operators to cooperate and work positively with the responsible authorities. The main objective is to protect and safeguard the public and to ensure that only fit and proper people hold the licence. Warnings are generally considered to be the first option for dealing with compliance issues, and it's only where the warnings haven't been effective that you might be asked to consider taking action against the licence. And refusing to renew a licence is an alternative to revocation. So unless I can help you further, that's my advice to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Lewin. I don't think there's anything further from us, so we'll now deliberate on our decision and then give it to you in due course.